off, of course, with our Seahawks here, who went to Lambeau Field, went to play the Green Bay Packers on the road in this game, week 3 of the preseason, the finale of the preseason for 2023. A big opportunity for a lot of the players who don't necessarily have their spot carved out, don't necessarily know if they're going to be on the roster, for them to go out and showcase that. At quarterback, though, it was mainly Drew Lock getting the snaps. All but 10 of the 35 pass attempts made by a quarterback on the Seahawks side were Drew Lock. Holton Ahlers got the last drive of the game for the Seahawks. And that was about it. They wanted to get Drew Lock more reps and more experience, and he was able to do that in this game. But the Seahawks would lose this one 15-19. Holton on that last drive of the game threw an interception. The Seahawks were actually in the red zone driving, trying to go ahead and win the game there. They were unable to do so, and the Seahawks would lose a preseason game. Who really cares? Holton Ahlers not able to get that comeback game-winning drive. Talking about offensive and defensive players of the game, I went with Drew Lock. 16 completions on 25 pass attempts, 150 yards in total, 1 touchdown through the air, a 93.8 quarterback rating. So, not the worst thing in the world. He didn't get sacked. He didn't throw an interception. He was able to clean up the turnovers, which is a big thing for Drew Lock. And, this was big for him. It was very interesting earlier in the offseason that Geno Smith said that he kind of felt bad for Drew Lock because and it was interesting, this quote, because Geno Smith is very confident in Drew Lock and thinks he can start at with other teams, but instead Drew Lock is going to have to sit here and be the backup to Geno Smith. So it's interesting in that regard to hear Geno say that. But you want to keep your backup ready. I respect that. So I believe the Seahawks are going to plan to look at a third quarterback through these next few weeks. It might be Ahlers, it might not be. So we'll be interested to see how that plays out. The guy will likely be on the practice squad as opposed to the actual depth chart. So, excuse me. Yeah, I apologize. This episode might be shorter than normal. You might notice the bags under my eyes. It's been a long weekend, and we're pushing through it. So, yeah, it could have gone with Aesop Winston Jr. had 3 receptions, 74 yards. Jake Bobo had a decent game here. We'll talk about him in a minute. But I went with Drew Lock on offense. On defense, I don't even have a photo of him in his game action. We went with the safety / defensive back because he's kind of played all over. Jarek Reed, the second late round guy that the Seahawks selected this year. 6 total tackles, 5 solo, 2 tackles for loss. He was flying around in this game, making an impact, and it's really going to be a tough spot for him to make the roster, considering how stacked the secondary is for the Seahawks. Especially, and that doesn't even include the guys that are fully healthy. Not fully healthy right now with Devin Witherspoon trying to get back. So it's in Jamal. Well, we'll get to Jamal news in a minute, but yeah, it's gonna be tough. But he showed out and maybe ends up earning a spot on the practice squad, or another team sees this and wants to give him a shot. He's kind of undersized as a safety, but that never stopped anybody. It didn't stop Earl Thomas. So yeah, I'm not sure. It's a game like this where it's essentially just very much a tryout for a bunch of these guys to go and a lot of them are fighting for their jobs, really. In Locke's case, it was just getting more reps. A lot of them, it was fighting for roster spot. It was funny. Jake Bobo, 2 receptions, 27 yards, and a touchdown. The first touchdown that the Seahawks scored. Nice little inside release. Was able to get through some traffic, and that sneaky speed of his was able to get him into the end zone, get a step on his defender. Drew Lock was able to find him in stride for 6. It was funny because post game Bobo was like, he's been sweating the cut date. He's had the finalized roster dates for when the NFL teams need to turn in their finalized 53-man rosters. He's had it circled on his calendar, and I'm like, I think he's played well enough to earn a spot on the 53-man. Obviously you're going to have DK and Tyler and JSN. But from there it just kind of goes. It's interesting. Derek Young is a guy who's I've heard his name a lot. D. Eskridge isn't going to be available for the first 6 weeks of the regular season. So at least in that very instance, for 6 weeks, Jake Bobo has a spot, I would think, and that's not exactly how that works. But I think he makes the 53-man roster. I don't think it's much of a debate. I don't think there's much doubt about it, personally. So, yeah, no, it was interesting to kind of see that. You didn't really see much of any of the starters get playtime this preseason. A few of the starters got in for a drive or so. I believe it was in the game against Dallas. That was about it. And that's probably all they need. I'm sure the first few drives of week 1 might be rusty for some of the players. Hopefully it doesn't have a big impact on the game, but yeah, no, it made a lot of sense how the Seahawks played this out and how training camp went. So we'll look here at roster moves. The cuts to go from the 90-man preseason roster down to the 53-man regular season roster have already begun. The Seahawks made 7 cuts yesterday, starting with tight end Sal Cannella, defensive end Jordan Ferguson, wide receiver Malik Flowers. Uh, yeah, you'll see it there. It's just it's gonna be tough, because there are guys who maybe fit elsewhere. Maybe they didn't even get that much of a chance. Here in Seattle, they only got a few reps, and they might have been in quote unquote garbage time. It's such a small sample size. Cornerback Benji Franklin, wide receiver Justin Marshall, cornerback Chris Steele, and UW running back Wayne Tulapapa. And I talk about getting a little bit of a chance. Tulapapa got, I think, his first snaps of the game were on that final drive of the game, when Allers and the Seahawks were trying to drive. So yeah, it's tough to get that going, but this leaves the Seahawks at 83 players on the roster. More will need to be coming in the next few days. I'm sure that we'll get some today by the time that this episode has dropped. Starting on Wednesday, teams can begin forming their 16-player practice squads, and it'll be very interesting to see how many of the players' names that we've seen mentioned in the preseason in training camp ending up on that practice squad. Pete Carroll has said that the hope is to keep as many players from the current roster around as possible. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, it's going to be tough. Pete Carroll said he loves this group. He loves the group they've got and wanting to keep them together and trying to see what they can do. But, at the end of the day, if some of these guys show out enough for other teams, they're going to get claimed by other teams. And so, again, will be very interesting. Well, I say more, not quite. Good news here. Jamal Adams this past week passed his physical on the 24th. He will be going through walkthroughs and such. I don't believe he's expected to make the week 1. I don't think he'll play on week 1. Jordan Brooks is supposed to play by week 1, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, who on the 22nd of August underwent wrist surgery, still could have a chance to start the regular season. That surgery will determine how long he will miss. He does have a screw in that wrist. He hurt it in that preseason game against the Cowboys when he had that big catch that we talked about so much last week. But he sounded like he was in good spirits. And from what I understand, he might not be so much of a long shot to make week 1. So we'll see about that. By the end of the day, you want to keep him for the long haul. So looking ahead, the Seahawks finish the preseason with a 2-win, 1-loss record. Their next game is September 10th. That's going to be regular season week 1 here at home at Lumen Field against the Los Angeles Rams. That's a 1:25 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. It's going to be a big one. You got a division rival in here. There's a lot of hype and excitement around the Seahawks this season, coming off of that last year where they arguably overachieved. You've got all these exciting new rookies. Julian Love in the secondary was signed in free agency. Dre'Mont Jones on the defensive line was signed in free agency. So it's going to be you brought back Jerron Reed. So the Seahawks have a lot of talent, whether that be younger, signed through free agency, drafted guys who are coming back and looking to build off of impressive years last year. It should be a fun season. It should be a really fun season. We will have more Seahawks related content for you as you follow us on Circling Seattle Sports across all sorts of social media. That includes here on YouTube. If you just put in Circling Seattle Sports, you should find our YouTube channel. You also find, of course, all the other CSS on Converge episodes, but make sure you're looking at our socials for more Seahawks content, of course.